Welcome to America's Heroes Group.
Welcome back to America's Heroes Group. This time our roundtable honoring World War II Navy veteran Harry Belafonte. Today is Saturday, April 29, 2023. April is Sexual Assault, Minority Health, and Autism Awareness Month. Our host is Kelley. I'm Sean Claiborne, the co-host. Our executive producer is Glenda Smith, and our digital media producer is Ivan Ortega of Scouts on production. And of course, our technical producer and studio engineer today and filling in as an executive producer is Shakaya. Thank you for your service today. We have a panelist on the line with us. That's Danny K. Davis, the Honorable Illinois 7th Congressional District Congressman and America's Heroes Group Advisory Board member, and Kirkland Burke, U.S. Navy veteran and military historian. We're going to talk about honoring the life and legacy of World War II Navy veteran Harry Belafonte, a personal friend of Cliff Kelley. How you doing, Mr. Davis? Honorable Davis. Can you hear us? We got some silence right now, so I'm going to go to Kirkland. Mr. Burke, can you hear us?
Hello.
There you are.
This is Kirkland.
How you doing?
Oh, I'm enjoying one of the best days of my life, and I hope you do the same.
I appreciate that. So we had a sad passing this last Tuesday. We had the passing of many people don't realize is an actual World War II veteran, Navy veteran, sailor, veteran Harry Belafonte. So what types of things would you tell us as a historian about Mr. Belafonte and also his naval service?
Well, I know he dropped out of high school during the war to join the Navy, and I unfortunately I don't know what rate he held in the Navy, but I do know he was eventually stationed at Port Chicago, California, and he was sent there shortly after the disaster. I don't know if you're familiar with that.
I've read a little bit about that. Tell us about the Port Chicago 50.
Port Chicago was an ammunition loading station. They loaded the ammunition onto the ships that were taking part in the Pacific theater of war. And loading ammunition is an extremely dangerous operation. That and refueling are probably the most dangerous operations that are carried on the ship. Loading ammunition is a all-hands, what they call an all-hands working party, and it's all-hands working party. Everybody is involved in handling the ammunition except the captain. The one thing about those shells, though, especially like illuminating shells, they are extremely volatile. If you drop them, they could go off.
Wow.
Most of the sailors that were working loading the ammunition onto the ships, they were black Americans. They were not trained in loading ammunition. They gave them no training, gave them no special equipment, no special gloves or anything. All the things that they should have done, it was not done. It eventually led to an explosion there that killed 320 people. That was the worst disaster on U.S. soil during the war.
Wow.
And most of them killed were black Americans. And then shortly after that, as the smoke cleared, they turned around and wanted them to go in and do the cleanup in terms of removing debris and looking for, basically they were looking for body parts, because a very small number were actually found intact. And the Port Chicago incident, what happened was there was a group told to go to continue the operation of reloading after that. They refused until they were properly trained. They were threatened with being charged with mutiny and everything. The bottom line out of that, some went back to work. 50 didn't. They were the Port Chicago 50. And they were eventually court-martialed, given dishonorable discharges, and received sentences. They were sentenced to hard labor at Leavenworth. And that's the NAACP protested. They even went as far. They went to FDR. They went to Eleanor Roosevelt. They never got that reversed. That's the Port Chicago incident. It's Port Chicago, California.
Right.
And that location now is Concord, California.
And I remember that I read something about Belafonte. He described it as a miscarriage of justice, and this is a quote from him, "the largest mass trial in naval history and a national disgrace." But what else do you have as far as...
Right, and he was very active in protest about going back in that when he went there. He seems like from that point, I don't know what he did prior to that, but it seems like at that point he became very committed to civil rights, and then evolved into human rights activist, and it kind of followed him through there.
Wow.
And I don't know if it had been mentioned. He was very instrumental in organizing the celebrities, the Hollywood celebrities, and recording artists for the March on Washington in 1963.
Cliff Kelley was a good friend of Harry Belafonte, and he would tell us stories. Sometimes he would take us out to dinner. I remember him telling us a story that at one point Dr. King actually was basically broke for the most part. When he was living here in Chicago. And Harry Belafonte, out of his own pocket, donated money to help him continue the work he was doing in civil rights.
Right. After he was assassinated, Harry Belafonte actually had taken care of putting aside funds for the children's education. He also was right there. After he was assassinated, remember, I don't know if you were old enough to be around then, but they did go back and march in Memphis, and Mrs. King went with Abernathy, and right there, Harry Belafonte was right there next to, I believe it was Yolanda, the oldest daughter, leading the march, and they wanted to finish what he had started.
Wow.
But like the March on Washington, he got, naturally he had Sidney Poitier with him, and also, believe it or not, one of the people that was very instrumental in helping get Hollywood celebrities there was Charlton Heston.
Mm-hmm.
And they had people like Paul Newman was there, Sammy Davis Jr., Marlon Brando, Rita Moreno, Burt Lancaster, Joanne Woodward. This was Hollywood royalty at that time. Diane Carroll, Bob Dylan was there, Peter, Paul, and Mary, Joan Baez, Ruby Dee and Ossie Davis. We know they were there. And Tony Curtis. This was the elite of Hollywood gathered there. And a lot of that time, now the only thing they talk about is Dr. King was there. But he was merely, I shouldn't say merely, but he was a speaker there. There was a whole event. It wasn't just him speaking.
And it was organized by A. Philip Randolph.
Right.
People think that was
and Bayard Rustin. So, and he stayed active in civil rights constantly. He was always helping to fund. I believe he really funded the organization SNCC, the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, because those groups didn't have any funds.
Wow.
And he was always participating. He was always speaking out for social justice and civil rights. And I kind of separate the two. The civil rights movement dealt with the rights that we should have in this country as Black Americans, guaranteed by the Constitution. Human rights are rights that you have based on the fact that you are a human being on this planet.
Wow.
So there is kind of a difference in those two.
So Mr. Davis, he's not going to be able to join us today, but we do have no less of an important person. Our executive producer is Glenda Smith. Can you hear us, Glenda? Glenda? It's like we are.
Hello?
There you are.
Yeah. Hey, Sean. How are you?
Pretty good. So
wonderful. Mr. Kirkland, thank you so much for calling in. And, given a total perspective of who Mr. Harry Belafonte was, not to only as a civil rights advocate, but he served his country. And I was sort of shocked when I was looking at the news of his passing that no news outlet really mentioned that. I'm like, okay, do you not know, or was it not important to you? So we as a country are really going to have to understand the importance of veterans and the fact that they have served. And they earn every right to be recognized, period. So, Mr. Kirkland, thank you so much.
When they talked about hidden figures, we have hidden history.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, we do, sir.
Supposedly, when Clint Eastwood made his film about the soldiers at Iwo Jima,
right, sir, right,
and he didn't include any black soldiers. And when they brought it up, he made the statement that he didn't think that any of them were there, and he said it because all the war movies he had seen, he never saw any black soldiers in it.
Absolutely.
So it's kind of we have been omitted from history, and these things, and I hope people that are listening, if you have children, grandchildren, tell them that if you don't tell them, nobody's going to know in a minute.
Now, Glenda, I wanted to switch gears a little bit because you and your family, you had a person that passed away recently. And tell us about your story and what happened. So I know you're out of state right now. You're normally with us here in the studio on a Saturday.
Right.
You know, remember the days we used to drive all the way up from, was it Tennessee or Kentucky?
Kentucky.
She drove all the way from Kentucky to do the show on Friday night. After the show, would drive back to Kentucky to take care of her mom.
Yeah, because at that time she was, my mom had stage 3 cervical cancer, and she was going through chemo and radiation. So, yeah. But to just end off of what Mr. Kirkland just said, that's why America's Heroes Group was started. Cliff and I got an understanding. I praise God for giving me the epiphany to share with Cliff that veterans weren't not really talked about, weren't being discussed, particular black veterans. So I had the pleasure of meeting Mr. Harry Belafonte twice at St. Sabino during Black History Month. The first time, I told him from my heart, thank you for your support, your time, your sacrifice from your family in supporting Dr. King and the civil rights movement protesters. Because now let me segue to my dad. Growing up in Mississippi in poverty and Jim Crow, he didn't have a chance to become educated like we have now. They were sharecroppers, so they were working to put food in their mouth. He picked cotton as a young boy to help provide in that way. As he grew older, he became more aware of inequality and things that were happening to them in particular in Mississippi, and he decided to take a stance. Back, and we're talking about the 60s, when it was ripe, raw, and very, very, very dangerous. He took that stand on behalf of everybody, himself, his community, his family, everybody else, and protested directly with Dr. King. Directly. He was there. Directly, he went to jail. Directly, he was involved until he decided to come north, like so many blacks did, that black belt, that they called it. He moved from there, came to Detroit. He moved in with his brother, his older brother, and started working at a company named Fitzsimmons. He got married to my stepmom. They had 2 children. I'm the one of 3. I'm the oldest. My dad was determined that his family would see better days than he had in his humble beginning. I'm college educated, my sister's college educated, and so is my brother. So to that fact, we're talking about a man that had limited education, picked cotton in our cotton field, came north, and decided that was my beginning. That's not going to be my end. So he worked 30 years at Fitzsimmons. It's an automotive parts company. Became a union steward, number one. Number two, he started and ran a successful landscaping business for over 30 years. And I learned he had over 250 customers. Number three, he was such a family man to the fact that the nieces and nephews looked at him as either their big brother or their father figure, and they knew if a financial crisis came up, they could call on him and he would show up. Not only for them, but he did that also for sisters and brothers. So he retired after working those 30 years and running that successful landscaping business part-time. He retired down. And then he had real estate. He was an owner, to my understanding, through my brother, of 14 houses. So there are no excuses, because my dad set the standard for my brother, my sister, myself as a no-nonsense, and I mean he was that disciplinarian. No nonsense, no excuses. I'm not going to listen to the BS, because if I could do it from back then with nothing, you all can't come to me with that. He supported education. He made sure we got what he could not get, because living in the South, denied housing, denied education, denied everything because of Jim Crow. Segregated to the point there was no schooling. So based off what he could get, he came north, and look how God blessed him. So we celebrated him yesterday. And then to listen to the community people say, when some of their family members would come out of jail or out of prison, they came to Mr. Longstreet and got a job at working in his landscaping company, because what he said to them was, that's your past. I can give you a new start if you want to. I don't care about your past. I care about your present. So if you want a new start, I can work with you. And that's who he was. They spoke so highly of the fact he embraced that community and gave so many of their children jobs through his landscaping services. So we celebrated him. But, of course, it feels like right now like a max something is standing on my heart. Mm. But God.
When did he pass?
So I appreciate God giving him to me for 79 years.
When did he pass away?
Because he didn't suffer. He had a massive heart attack almost 3 weeks ago.
Wow.
We had to decide to unplug him because nothing was functioning and everything was shutting down. So God blessed him to ease out in an easy transition. So
and I think it's important to
what more can I say about somebody who I respected, I loved, when I say fear, I mean like the God of fear. Like he didn't try to be buddies and I'm your friend. He was that old-fashioned school dad. I'm your father. I'm not your friend. So all three of us knew, don't cross him, because he would not tolerate it. He was no nonsense. If you was doing something constructive, he had your back all the way. But you weren't going to waste his time and you weren't going to waste his money. He was just about the business of being about business. So that's who my dad is. That's who he was. And that's who I celebrate, Sean, because that tough love of not allowing me to give him, especially when I wasn't really focused and really doing what I was supposed to do in school. And he didn't tolerate trying to listen to any excuses. You didn't come to him with the the white man excuse and he didn't want to hear that. He didn't want to hear that. He wanted to know, what are you going to do and what are you doing? And how are you going to get there? That was the bottom line. So,
just like so many veterans across the country, adversity oftentimes breeds leadership and also breeds that perseverance, that spirit of ownership, and that
absolutely.
That
so
dedication.
I think Mr. Harry Belafonte, because when my dad went to jail, my mom went to jail, my auntie went to jail and protesting down there, it was his money that bailed them out.
Wow. It
was his money that bailed out any protesters that went to jail during that time. So in a moment of silence, I recognize, I honor Mr. Harry Belafonte and my dad, Mr. Charles Oliver Longstreet Sr.
This is America's Heroes Group. We'll be right back.